Welcome, everyone. Glad to see you all out tonight for Bible study. I want to start off just open up in a word of prayer on tonight. Our kind and gracious Father, Lord, we thank you so much for just being kind to us, for being such a good God, for being an awesome God. Lord, you have watched over us all the day long. You have kept us, Lord, when we couldn't even keep ourselves. So for that, Lord, we simply tell you thank you. We honor you on tonight, Lord, and come into your presence, Lord, to study and learn more of you, God, Lord, that we can understand how to please you more. So, Father, on tonight, we just ask that you would inspire us, encourage us, Lord, to learn more about you and about your word, that we may go to higher heights and deeper depths. This is my prayer. It's in Jesus' matchless name we pray. Amen. Amen. How's everyone doing tonight? Amen. So glad to see all of you out this morning, actually this evening. And we're going to do something a little bit different tonight before we get there. First, want to honor our pastor, Dr. Logan, and First Lady Logan. Many of you know that they are preparing to go do the Lord's work. They'll be traveling, and so graciously got the offer to conduct Bible study on tonight. And so pleased to do this on this evening. So I would ask that you certainly do solicit your prayers for them, that you would continue to lift them up in prayer and continue to pray for them for their health and for their strength. As many of you know, traveling can get you tired sometimes. So it's so good. But in times like that, you have to take opportunities to rest. As you know, our theme for the year is dealing with rest. And so in an offshoot way, we're going to talk about that. I had the wonderful opportunity to, as you see up on the screen, to go and tour the Holy Land. And I want to talk about that from the perspective of not only from resting, but from really coming to understand more about the Bible and to actually making the Bible come alive. Oftentimes we read things in the Bible and it seems so far removed. But when you have opportunity to come and to see some of these things, then it brings a certain level of relevancy to the Bible that I don't know that you can get in other ways. So this is going to be somewhat interactive. We'll talk through some things. I've got some pictures to show you and make some of the places that I went and visited. To be able to discuss those things. So by all means, for those who are in the audience, feel free to ask questions. I can't promise you that I'm going to have the answer, but we'll try to do our best. And also those of you online, if you so desire, type in the chat, hit us up however you are watching us, and we'll try to answer those questions too as I get them to me. So anything is kind of open. And we're just going to kind of flow with that for the duration. Any questions before I get started? All right, hearing none. So I was able to go, and as you can see up here, I titled the Holy Land Tour. And as you can see, I've only got 9 days. It was about 10 to 12 days. I tried to exclude some of the travel days, and we'll talk about that towards the end if you are interested. And about all those different details pertaining to the logistics of the trip. I'd be more than happy to share some of that information with you. So let's go ahead and just kind of talk and get started. So in looking at, I'll start with the trip overview. Somebody can help me with my clicks. All right, so for the trip overview, when we started and looking at that, so looking at the map here, what's being shown is obviously we went to Israel, and what I'm depicting here is where Israel sits. You can see the little dot there where Israel sits. You've got Jordan or the Mediterranean to the west, Jordan roughly to the east. It's surrounded by Egypt and Syria, and you can just kind of see it's just that small strip of pink, just a really small area where Israel is located. And as I was looking at that, and talking about it, think about it from this perspective. Right, Israel, right, is situated on the eastern coastline of the Mediterranean Sea. It's bordered on the northeast by Syria, on the east by Jordan, and on the southwest by Egypt. And you can just see geography-wise how it's just that little strip, right? It's about 290 miles from north to south and about 85 miles wide. So roughly, I put it's about the size of New Jersey, the whole country of Israel, right? Just a very, not very big when you think about it. I know when we read our Bibles and we're looking at it and we're seeing how people traveled, you have to imagine they was walking, right? So when it told them they took some days to get to where they were going, right, those was mainly by means of walking or on a donkey. So you can kind of get that in perspective if you're walking, well, how long that would take you. Now, go a little forward. And looking at where we're coming from. So I had two questions. And I want to talk about that, just spend a little bit of time talking about this because there's some relevancy here. And that is, so why did God ask Abraham? Think about this. When we read the text of the Old Testament, Abraham is living in what's called the Fertile Crescent, right? He didn't start off in Israel, right? He's living in the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia, right? The cradle of civilization, all those different things that we learned about in school. That's where he's residing at. And then, right, as the Bible story goes, right, God did what? Called him, told him to leave your family, right, your kindred, your people, your kinfolk, right? Right. Go to a land that I'm going to show you, right? You don't even know where you're going. And that land that he told him to go to, now we call it Israel, right? But that's the land when he said go to Canaan land, right? That's what Israel is, right? Israel is Canaan land. And so he told him to go to this land. Now, why did God ask Abraham to uproot his family and move all the way to Canaan? It's interesting. Why couldn't he do what he was going to do right then and there? Why couldn't he leave him where he was? Right. The second question is, and to understand the answer, then we have to talk and dialogue a little bit about what is the importance, right, of that narrow piece of real estate, which we call the Holy Land. I'm going to talk about that for a little bit. So what do we think? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you this is the interactive portion of the conversation. I forgot to let that be known. What do we think? I mean, let's think about it. Right? So first, why did God tell Abraham to move to here specifically? Why did he ask him? All right, I'm here. He's setting him apart. Okay, that definitely set him apart. What else?
I mean, when you were saying how narrow it was and small it is, I guess he didn't want them to be dependent upon how small the land is, but be dependent on how big their God is.
All right. There's some theological significance, being dependent upon God instead of upon the natural resources or whatever it is that could provide it, right? So obviously a small people in a small place, right, would naturally depend upon God. Okay, what else?
No, I guess I can't speak to why he told Abraham to uproot, other than where he was at was not key to what God was doing in the future. And that little small strip of land is key to some of the promises and the things that are to come with the second coming of Christ. Israel is key to that. I do know that much.
Yeah, Israel is key to that.
Yeah.
That's true, right? But we're at the beginning in the book of Genesis.
That's why I couldn't ask
Right.
why he told him.
Yeah, it seems there's a lot of things, and I'm intentionally wanting us to think about this because oftentimes we think from our perspective of we know the story already, but do we really know the story? Right? Do we really understand in God's mind, or in the mind of God, the things that he's carrying and he's walking out, right, his plans? So thinking about that, what was God's plan? What was God's plan? All right, Sister Frankie?
For lack of a way to say it, like I said earlier, that they were set apart
Mm-hmm.
and chosen. They were going to be the chosen people. And no, I had.
No, I like where you at. That's a good vein. Chosen people.
I think God wanted to get Abraham away from his familiar surroundings and show him what he wanted him to do outside of the land or of the people that he knew. So he wanted to use him outside of where he was now. He couldn't use him where he was.
Okay. All right. Let's stay a little bit with the chosen. When we talk about we are a chosen people, right? Getting to Peter, right? Royal priesthood, all that good stuff. But in this particular instance, right? God chose. He chose Abraham, and he chose Abraham to go to Canaan, which is Israel. So there's something about both of those choices that has to do with God's plan for humanity. All right, Sister Frank?
I was just going to say maybe, I don't know, God knows everything, but maybe he just knew that Abraham would be, if he's willing to leave his family and travel somewhere completely different under what God has told him, once God got him to Israel, maybe he knew that he would further do what he asked him to do.
Okay. Yeah, there is a lot with the obedience of Abraham. Abraham obviously being the father of our faith, right? So he had what was necessary, right, to do. And I'm intentionally digging a little bit, right, because we oftentimes think it's not just the person, it's also the place. Mm-hmm. Right? Think about your life. I go to hand in the back, and then we'll kind of continue the discussion. But I want you to think about person and place for a minute. Not just the person, it's the place. And think about how that relates to your life.
Yeah, Elder Baker, I know that there were some places like Mount Horeb was a place where God's presence was, where Abraham had to meet God. So God had to bring him to a place that we might have been in his holy ground to meet God on that ground.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about this. You want to have one more, and then we'll continue the conversation.
No, I just wanted to add that was not Canaan filled with idolatry?
Mm-hmm.
So since they were set apart, I'm just remembering God telling the people that live in that land to not do as those people do.
Okay.
So I don't know if that could be, that's part of being set apart, I think.
Okay. Let's think about this, and certainly appreciate all of your answers, right? And there's right bits and pieces in everything that you're saying that surrounds the bigger, right? The bigger picture of what's going on here, right? When we go back to the garden, you want to go back to the garden? All right, let's go back to the garden. All right, what happened in the garden? Adam and Eve had this little apple problem, right? Little snake problem, right? You know, thinking about all those things, and that caused, right, we call that, right, the fall. So now, after the fall, man has a problem. Got a heart condition. Man has a problem. How does the problem get fixed? All right, through Christ, I go with that. Right, some, right, years down the road, through Christ, right, sacrifices, things like that. But who has the problem?
Man has a problem.
Man has the problem, right? And when we say man, then we mean humanity. Humanity has the problem. How does humanity get fixed? Because what was the promise? Who was the promise to? It was to who?
It was to Israel,
To Israel, but also to
Abraham,
and
his descendants.
his seed.
That's right.
Right? And when you look right in the Bible, then we really understand that God's plan of salvation was always for who? Always for everybody.
Everybody.
His plan of salvation was always for everybody. Right? Paul picks that up. Says he didn't just say to Abraham and his seed, he said his descendants. And we know that by proxy, right, through adoption, that we are his descendants. So how do people find out? How do people find that out? I'm taking the long way home on this one because it's an important point. What's that? Gospel being spread, the good news. See, we getting close now, right? It's not just about people, it's about places. Not just about people, it's also about places. So when you think about Israel, and I'm going to bring this so we can move on, now keeping that in mind and thinking about Israel and where it's located, geographically, where's Israel located? We talked about that on the previous slide a little bit, but in saying, I'm trying to go back on here, right? In saying Mediterranean Sea, right? It's bordered on the northeast by Syria, on the east by Jordan, southwest by Egypt. Egypt is in where? Africa. Okay. When you get up into the upper parts in Syria and places like that, then you get to another continent. Right? When you look at the geography of Israel, what you're going to notice is that Israel is a land bridge. It is a land bridge. It connects, it is the only land bridge connection that connects 3 continents: Africa, Asia, and Europe. That's what Israel is. It is a land bridge. Small, narrow. So now, keeping this in mind, the overall big picture of God's plan to fix or to save humanity. Abraham, down in the Fertile Crescent, in Mesopotamia area, he's nowhere near. Where's the traffic, in other words? If you're in Africa, or you're in Asia, and you're in Europe, and you're traveling, where are you going to go through? You're going to go through Israel, because it's the bridge. It's the connecting point. So think about it from that perspective, right? Everything doesn't have to be these high theological thoughts. God does things in very practical means. If I need, and we talked about it, the gospel is for who? The gospel is for everyone. God chose Abraham. He chose the people, the tribe, the Israelites, as his chosen people. But what were they chosen to do? What was the role of God's chosen people? What was their job? To represent him. Spread the gospel, right? In this particular instance, right, back in the days of the Old Testament, they were to represent God in the earth. They were to show people that they had a heart condition. That's the whole point of when we read through, right, the meta-narrative, if you will, or the big picture of the Bible, is we got a heart problem. And how you gonna know you got a heart problem if don't nobody tell you you got a heart problem? So God placed his chosen people in a place, a physical place, that would be high traffic. Everybody from every nation at that known time is going to come through or interact through this land bridge that we call Israel. It is the only connecting place, the only land bridge that allows access from Africa into Asia and into Europe. So all of those ites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Mezrite, all them, Jebus, all them, right? All the known people in the world would interact somehow through Israel. It's been that way since then, and it's that way today. That's why there have been so many things and battles fought. It's such a strategically located place. When you think about it geographically, it is a strategic place that everyone wants access to. And people have tried to take this from the Israelites for years and years and years and years. But for whatever reason, right, a small nation. I mean, the size, like we said, the size of New Jersey. So you can see God's covenant and God's blessing, right? But when you think about it, I said all that to say, it's not about just the people. Abraham is important. But Abraham in Israel, or Abraham in Canaan land, is the key to spreading, or being able to spread this gospel, being able to take and bring about God's plan of salvation for humanity. Now, we don't think about that, but if you got a business, where you want your business to be? Yeah. Yeah, if I got something that I'm trying to get out, I'm gonna find the busiest corner I can, right? Ask the panhandlers. You don't see no panhandlers down on, you don't see no panhandlers out in Buckeye, right? Yeah, ain't no traffic down there. Well, you see them right in the heart of the city. So when you think about that location, right? Location, 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 right? We learned that in real estate, right? It's the same thing in God's economy. Locations are important. So in thinking about that, I just want to highlight that for our understanding of why Israel, right? We think oftentimes, yeah, and if you think about it, God is God. He's sovereign. He could have did anything he wanted with Abraham, wherever Abraham was, right? So thinking about it a little bit deeper, he told him to leave that place and go to this place for a reason. It wasn't arbitrary. Just get up, leave your folks, and I'm going to show you where you land. No, there's a specific reason, and we just talked about it, why God put him in this small country that we now call Israel, or the Holy Land, or Canaan land, or the promise, however you want to term it. That's why God put him there. All right, so now we can get a little bit further to our conversation. And in looking at that, so in Israel, I just want to list out all these different places. Now, I'll tell you, I don't know if we're going to cover everything, right? This won't be a very in-depth lecture, because this is really high level, just kind of thinking about all the different places. But I'll try to hit a few highlights, a few points, show you a few pictures, just so we can kind of get a little bit better understanding. So I want it to be not only informational, but I also want it to be encouraging. So if you go and see some of these things, but you can look at the list: Caesarea, Jezreel Valley, Megiddo, Nazareth, Cana, some places that you're probably familiar with, some other places that you may or may not be familiar with. But we went all over, right, this little country that we call Israel, visiting all these different places. All right, so with that, let's get into a little bit more. All right, so day 1 and 2 I put was our travel days. It takes, I think I calculated, so we left here Thursday morning about 9 a.m., and we got to Tel Aviv at 5 p.m. on Friday. Whoa, I don't know where they went with that. 5 p.m. on Friday. They'll get us back. And that's a lengthy amount of travel. That's with like a 5 or 6 hour layover in New York. So depending on where you may lay over at, that was a very lengthy layover to get through there. And we're almost there. So Phoenix, New York, right? New York, Tel Aviv. I said that roughly about 14 to 20 hours, depending on layovers to Phoenix, the times that we got there. And it was not actually a long ride. That's a long time. So once we got there, we kind of really started what I count on day 3. And what we were looking at was Caesarea, the Jezreel Valley / Megiddo, and I'll talk a little bit about that, Nazareth, Cana, and then Galilee. So in looking at it, so these spots that we hit, if we're looking at the map of Israel again, then what we see is some of the places that we went to. The black, you can see where Nazareth is, you can see where Megiddo is, and you can see where Caesarea is. And just want to highlight just a few points of emphasis for these particular places. Now, when we look at in the Bible, Caesarea, that's one of the first places that we hit. And that is just full of biblical history, right? For instance, when you look at, and I missed some points here, but this is from the book of Acts, right? In the book of Acts, you'll see that Paul sails from Caesarea to Tarsus. Right, when you get to Acts 10, Peter brings, we read the story in Acts 10 where Peter brings the gospel to Cornelius. He does that in Caesarea. In Acts 12, 19 through 22, Herod Agrippa dies here. In Acts 18 and 22, Paul landed there following his second missionary journey. And then in Acts 23 through 26, Paul is in prison for at least 2 years here in Caesarea. And on 3 separate occasions, this is when you hear about talk, when you read in the Bible, he's presenting himself before Felix and before Festus and before King Agrippa. All this is done in this place called Caesarea. And one of the reasons, now Caesarea, this will be akin, I believe, to like the ancient, if we were to go back in the modern day, Caesarea would have been like a modern day Las Vegas. It was happening. It was the place to be. You can see the water that's there, and I'll talk a little bit about these are when a lot of the pictures that you're going to see. These are the ruins that were uncovered, right? And so when they excavate or when they do the archaeological digs, what they're doing is just imagine that all these things were covered with dirt, right? Just over the centuries, it would be dirt, and then someone found something sticking out somewhere, and then they began to dig, and then lo and behold, they would uncover all of these particular items, and then they would just keep excavating until they find the city. And that's how they found most of these areas where we can come and look now. And so, like I said, the thing about Caesarea that I found really interesting is that we talk a lot about Herod the Great, you know, in a negative sense. Did you know that Herod was Jewish? Yeah, he was Jewish. But he was if I could say this, a Roman sympathizer. He was a crossover. What would we call some? No, don't use those words. I don't know whatever it is that we would say, right? Crossover, probably some other pejorative terms that we would use for somebody like that. But that's what Herod was, and I never really kind of understood why the people really hated him that much. But when you put it in that perspective, then you can kind of see, right? He wanted to gain the favor of the Roman Empire. And so even though he was Jewish, he was acting more Roman than the Romans. So the things that he did was big. He built this particular place, Caesarea, and what would happen is the ships would come in through the water, and then they would just see this glamorous city. I mean, he had things, Bass back there was a big deal. And he would have all these things. You could see the statues are Romanesque, and so he would be playing up to the Romans on a regular basis. And his goal, right, was to just build the biggest and the best city. Now, it just was not to impress the Romans. Right? What it was is that Herod understood that this is how he was a great businessman, if you will. He would make things such that people would want to spend time in Caesarea. That's why I said it would be like a modern day Las Vegas. Vegas just got stuff that just make you want to stay there. Right? You can go to Vegas and you're like, oh, I can do this, and things are plentiful, if you will, and you're having a good time and you say, I want to stay. What happens normally when you stay somewhere? You're going to spend money, right? You're going to spend money. And that's what Herod's plan was. He would have all these amenities, if you will, that was built into Caesarea, such that travelers coming through, would say, this is a happening spot. And they would stay, and in turn, they would spend money. So that's why I said a lot of times when we look at and we go to these places, then we really get a great understanding or a better understanding of, there's a lot of things that are just practical. Sometimes we get real deep into the Word of God, and God did, no. Some things just practical. He wanted to make some money. Right? And he understood that making money meant that keeping people in his city longer. And so he built things elaborately such that people would stay longer in the city. I mean, that's a simple, practical answer. Yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, so Gladiator, the Roman games, right? That was part of the entertainment system. Right? And what's unique about this place, it doesn't look like it, but what they found is that they took the concept of, I think, the arch of building arches. And so this particular stadium, when they went and found the arch structure and reconstructed it, that stadium would have held like 30,000 people. Just based on the arch structures are not there anymore, obviously, but when it was fully built, when they built it, they estimated that would have held like 30,000 people in that stadium, right? And that's where you would see the Roman games at. That's where you would see the things that we normally see in antiquity with gladiator battles and things like that. Right, good question. All right, moving right along. We'll keep going a little bit. And next place we'll look is, we stopped in, so the Jezreel Valley, or Megiddo, as it's called. This particular place has a lot of history there too. And just to run just a few things from the Bible that happened in this Jezreel Valley, and it will take a few looks at the picture. But Judges 4 through 22, right? When it talks about Deborah and Barak, they defeated the Canaanites there. Judges 6 through 7, this is where Gideon defeats the Midianites. 1 Kings 18 through 46, Elijah runs, right? Remember after Elijah has the battle on top of Mount Carmel, and he prayed for rain, he told Ahab, run down, it's about to rain. Elijah ran through what's called this Jezreel Valley, right? That's where he ran through. 1 Kings 21, when it talks about, there was a time in that particular passage where King Ahab wanted the vineyard of Naboth, and he wouldn't sell it. So then his wife, Jezebel, had him killed so that she could give him the vineyard. That was in this place. Jesus raised the only son of a widow, right? Nain is in the Jezreel Valley. That's the name of the city that it gives in Luke 7, 11 through 17. And additionally, in Revelations, we know that that's what we're most familiar with with the Jezreel Valley, or Megiddo, which is the same location. We're most familiar with the Battle of Armageddon. And so that's the significance of this particular place. Now, when we look at some of the pictures, now I have to explain a few things. This picture in the upper left, this is what's called a tell, right? So if you were to look it up, it would say Tel Megiddo. What a tell is, just the T-E-L, in archaeological terms, what that means is that mountain, that's not a natural mountain, if you will. What happens is, there is no, it talks about the battle of Battle of Armageddon on the mountain and things like that. There is no mountain there, and there never was a mountain there. But what they find is that what would happen is this particular tale, when a people come in and they live in a place, and then after however many years they live there, they either get conquered or the city gets destroyed. There's either some natural disaster, earthquake, something happens, and then those people die out, go away. And then the next set of people come in and they build on top of them. And then something happens to those people, and then the next people come in and they build on top of them. Right? So these are like, it's almost like, earthquake, whatever happens naturally, it covers everything. And then the people just come in and build on top of it. And so this particular tale at Megiddo, if I'm not mistaken, this is 26 layers. So 26 different time frames that people have built on the same location. And that's why it's built up kind of like a mountain. But when you read in the Bible, it talks about the mountain. There is no mountain there. The name for Megiddo, it's got Har, or where we get the word Armageddon from, right? The Hebrew Armageddon, it's Har Mageddon. Har is the Hebrew word for mountain or hill. So the hill of Megiddo, that's what Armageddon is, right? And so that's where we get that name from, but that's where this building or this structure, if you will, comes from. It's just layers on top of layers of people being conquered, defeated, dying out, whatever, and then the next people come in, they just build right on top of them, right? It's probably not much from what we do. I mean, we uncover civilizations. I mean, you go into the desert, right? And you dig far enough, you may uncover a civilization, right? It's the same. I see out there gasping. Oh my God! They build on. We do the same thing, right? It is what it is, But that's how this got that way for that. And then the other pictures. What's beautiful when we get into the book of Revelation, it talks about the battle of Armageddon. And so even though it doesn't look like it, this is that Jezreel Valley that you're looking at. It's all modernized now, obviously, in freeways and stuff there. But this is where, right, the last eschatological, right, the end time battle is going to happen, right? It's going to start in this valley, in the Jezreel Valley, right? So all the things when you're reading in the book of Revelations about the events that are going to occur, this is where that's going to occur at, right? In this Jezreel Valley. And so standing on top of, which is the upper right picture, standing on top of there, which is where we were, you could just look out over this valley and you can just see, just imagine, right? Now, there's, discussion, how can you get everybody, the number of people that it talks about being able to in this valley, right? No, this is where it's going to start. And then it's going to move, right? So all the nations of the world, right, is going to start here, though, is what the Bible tells us. This is the start of it. And so that's what we see in Megiddo. Any questions on that? Oh, I was hoping there was going to be none. No, kid. Go ahead.
Why was that place just so special where generation after generation or people are just built on top? What was so special about that one spot where peoples didn't go somewhere else to build?
Yeah, I'll give a general answer for all of these locations, right? And these people were what type of people? What was their main occupation? Agriculture. Agriculture, you got to have what? Land and water, right? So anytime you see like why people built in a certain place, it's primarily one of the necessities of life was there, right? It's land. In other words, a place where they can go. A lot of these people were sheep herders, right? And so the Jezreel Valley, you can see the plush green right, which means that there is some water, right, whether the water is coming down from somewhere, but there's a source of water, right? Like I said, a lot of the people, it's just practical, you know, and it's hard for us, I guess, sometimes to think about it because we just turn on faucets and stuff like that. But when you are dependent, right, when you think about Elijah and he asked God to shut up the heavens 2.5 years, that wasn't just, okay, we're not going to get nothing to drink. It's like, stuff going to die. You know, that was a big deal, right? The rain and the water. So a lot of times, like I said, it's one of the necessities of life people have found. And so if I move into a place and they got a water hole there, I think I'm going to stay. Another question.
I was just, you already said it. You said water hole. I was going to speak in reference to the wells, like Jacob's wells and the wells, yeah.
They found water. Found water. Okay. Excellent. All right, let's move on. So in next place, Nazareth, Cana of Galilee, very familiar with the biblical stories associated with that. Gabriel announces, right, the birth of Jesus. That happened in Nazareth. The first recorded preaching of Jesus is in Nazareth when he went into the temple, opened the Isaiah scroll. John 2 and 1 through 11, Jesus' first miracle, right? So those are some very popular things that we know that happened in Nazareth. Just add a few things, and I didn't really put any pictures of that up because Nazareth, and the reason I didn't put pictures up because it really was like the Bible says, right? Nazareth, the name means like little city, right? One of the disciples said, "Can any good thing come out of Nazareth?" It really ain't nothing to see there. I hate to put it that way. You know, you go to, there's a few sites, that mark the, that, yep, this was Jesus' town. You know, you're just like, Thomas was right. Ain't really a whole lot to see here, and that was Nazareth. All right, so day 4, and some of the things we saw: the Mount of Beatitudes, Capernaum, and the Jordan River. What do I like about Capernaum? Capernaum's popular. This was Jesus heals the servant of a Roman soldier. Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law. Also, he heals a paralyzed woman, and this is where he healed the woman with the issue of blood. Capernaum, after Jesus, remember he went back to Nazareth, and it was like, you Jesse boy, carpenter's son, right? Jesus, I ain't gonna do no miracles here, right? And they sought to stone him, and he escaped. And where did he go? He went to his Capernaum. This was his base of ministry once he left Nazareth. And so you can see why there's just a large presence of Jesus healing and doing different things in Capernaum. This was his base of ministry after he left Nazareth. And not a whole lot there. Like I said, these cities that you go to, there's a few things in antiquity that you can see, but it's just being in the presence and kind of understanding that. So this is a pic that I like, and what I like was Jesus heals the servant of a Roman soldier. That's the centurion. And when you read that particular story in Matthew 8:5-13. The centurion, this is the temple. This was a temple. And it's believed that the centurion built this temple for the Jews based on what Jesus had done for him. So he was, I don't know if it said he was a believer or not a believer, right? But what we do know is that the centurion, right, that was there built this particular temple for worship and here in Capernaum. Any questions on that? That's how they pronounce it over there. Capernaum. Yeah. That's probably true. I go with what they say. Since it's their language. But that does bring up a great point that I learned while I was over there that I thought was so interesting. Is that we've taken their words, like I said, Harmageddon, and we needed to make sense to us, so we just said Armageddon, right? Right. So it's not. So when you talk to people, it's not a translation; it's more of a transliteration, right? Which means that Har-Mageddon does not translate into Armageddon. It is a transliteration, which means that we making it so that we can say it too, even though we may not know what we're saying. We just make. In other words, we just making it up because it sounds. Y'all know how we do with names, right? Right? That's why some of y'all kids out there, names is all messed up. You don't know what you was. You just put it all together, right? Lemangelo. You name your baby Lemon Jello, like we don't know that, right? Let me get back serious. But that's so true. But I'm glad you brought that up, because that is how a lot of these things came about. Is we just transliterated. What did he say? Oh, he said Armageddon. Okay, Armageddon. God, hey, all right, I'm going with that. Right? And then we wrote it down and spelled it like it's a real word. It's not a real word. All right, and so let's Caper Dam. Another place we went to. So I put a few things in there about the Jordan River. It's always good to kind of understand about the Jordan River, where it's situated, which I like. You can see to one side. So the Jordan River is really just that river between the Sea of Galilee up top there and the Dead Sea, right? That constitutes the Jordan River. And of course, you go to Jordan River because you want to be baptized in a Jordan River. Now I just want you to look at this water. Right, remember the story about the little girl, right? Naaman had leprosy, right? And the little girl told him to go dip in, and he was like, ugh. You see why, right? That is the water of the Jordan River. It is not appetizing, and or it don't look that clean. It's green. Now I don't know if that's algae. I don't know what it is, right? But millions of people come, right? I was the only time I've been baptized was in the Jordan River, and that's the first time that I went to Israel back in the 90s or something like that, And I was thinking the same thing, like, oh, this don't look that clean, but I guess if it's clean enough for Jesus, it's clean enough for you. But that's the Jordan River. All right, questions on that? Trying to keep us on a good time here. I'm gonna stop at a certain time, whether I'm done or not, just to keep us in a good time frame. So this is the Mount of Beatitudes, as they call it. So imagine Jesus. What you see down here, that's the Sea of Galilee, right? Jesus comes across the Sea of Galilee, goes up on the mount, and he gives the Sermon on the Mount, right, in the book of Matthew, Sermon on the Plain, if you're reading the book of Luke, whichever one. But this is, you can imagine him walking up this mount. Now, what's so interesting, and like I said, they put a lot of churches on different sites so that you can mark those sites. But the question is, one, he's talking to a bunch of people, and he ain't got no microphone. You ever think about that? Talking to a bunch of folks. I put this mic down. Y'all be talking, I can't hear you. What's interesting about this is that when you go up and you look at the topography, and they've actually done tests in this area, is that the topography of the land, meaning the valley that you see there, it creates an echo chamber. So he literally was standing top of the mount, or the Sermon on the Mount, if you will, and as he spoke, then the people all the way from there, all the way to the back, they could hear because of this echo chamber effect. And I just thought that was so unique and interesting, to the point that those that have been to D.C., right? No, y'all been in D.C. You ever go to the White House? Right, they have that same thing, because you want to know how that they talk across both sides of the House and Congress and things like that. It's the same type of, now they constructed it like that, but they created these echo chambers to where you could talk on one side and it would bounce, the sound waves would bounce and then you could hear it on the other side. Now, God created that naturally. I don't know how they created theirs, right? But it's just amazing, and that's what I said. It brings relevancy to the stories because you should be having questions as you read the Bible. You should say, how did that? I mean, we just take a lot of things like Jesus had just this massive voice. He just spoke to 5,000 people. They could hear him. No, it had to be a way. Right? It had to be a way. And so it brings more credence, I think, when you read these stories and then people actually go out and they say, well, how did that happen? Right? I think God gets all the praise and glory for that. Amen. I mean, because it's amazing when you think about it. I mean, it's really amazing how these natural things that God used and orchestrated, for the simplest things, right? Jesus needed to be heard, right? So he made a way, right, that he could be heard in this particular instance. All right, let's keep it moving. Where are we at now? Day 5 through 8. I didn't put everything. We did more than this on days 5 through 8. I just kind of put the highlights of what we did here that was significant, I thought. So that's me. This Gideon. What happened at Gideon Springs? What's the story there? I remember Gideon. What's that? All right. Gideon was preparing to do battle. We looked back at the when we was in the Jezreel Valley, right? We talked about Gideon defeating the Midianites, right? And back to the Jezreel Valley, there was over like 200 or so battles fought there. That was just like the place that you just went and threw down at. Right? But we know the story that Gideon had all these people with him. Right? And some was scared, right? And God told Gideon, well, you got too many folk with you. Said, take them to, right? And this one, right? Now it was called the Spring of Harod, later named Gideon Springs, and you see that from Judges 7 and 5. But he said, take them, and those that lap like a dog, them your boys, right? And the other ones that, right, bend down and cup with their hands. Now I did it. I think I would have been going home, right? I tried to get down, right? Because what it was, the ones that went home was the ones that got down and bended a knee, right? And their knees touched the ground, right? They couldn't go. They wasn't. So I was trying it, but my knee hit the ground. So I'd have been like, all right, y'all, see y'all back at home. I'm gonna see y'all. I hope y'all do all right against the Midianites, but I'm going back to the crib. So y'all, yeah, it was difficult, but so I think I'd have been going home on that one. Getting been like, nope, you out of here, bruh. Yeah, but that was, and I like that at Gideon Springs. And then obviously went to Bethlehem. Just a few things in Bethlehem because we know the story of Bethlehem and the different sites that are marked. We know that Micah, that's where Jesus' birthplace was prophesied. The Magi, angels appear. Some things I did learn, though, right, that I didn't know, that I discovered there was that also Bethlehem, that was where Rachel was buried, right? So bringing the story, right, all the way from the Old Testament to the New. Rachel was buried in Bethlehem. And Ruth and Naomi, this is where when Ruth and Naomi, and we know the story, right, when their husbands died, and they were left, and Naomi said, or Ruth said, I'm going to chill with you, and my God will be, your God will be my God, and all that stuff, that this is where they went back to, was to Bethlehem, right? So this is where Boaz was. And so I thought that, I don't know how I've never pieced that together, right? But this is how significant and the different things that happen in Bethlehem. And it's kind of easy to understand once we talk about, right, the size of Israel. A lot of stuff happened in the same places over, right, periods of time. We just never really made the connections that these same things happen in these places. And so picture-wise, there's, so the one over here that marks, now remember, these are where they're marking it at, exact location. Don't be holding me to it. You touched Jesus' birthplace. No, this is their best estimate of where the birthplace of Jesus was. That's the one to the right. The manger I don't know if you can see the one down here to my left, but that marks the significant spot where they say the manger was. And then to the upper right is the church that they put on this spot. Like I said, most of these historic sites, someone, whether it be the Jews or whether it be whoever else the Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, some church organization, or the Catholics have come and they've put a church there to mark the location of where they say these particular things happen. Question?
That right there, is that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre?
No, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, that's where they say Jesus was buried at. This is the Church of the Nativity. Church of the Nativity. All right, with that, we'll move a little further to Jerusalem. A lot of stuff. I just highlighted a lot of stuff in Jerusalem. That's where we spent the majority, I would say, of our time, because there's just so much there in Jerusalem. But just cover a few points historically. We know, right, Jerusalem, the holy city, the city of David, all those things and everything that occurred and happened in Jerusalem. Some things that came from the Old Testament, if you will, right? Genesis 14:18. We know that Melchizedek is known as being the king of Salem, right? Or we know that Joshua defeated 5 kings, right, including the king of Jerusalem at the time. Different things with travelers. David, this is where David defeated the Jebusites, and that's when it became known as the city of David. In 2 Samuel, David brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. So just a lot of history that occurred in Jerusalem, just a tremendous amount of history when you look at all the Bible. So you're talking from Genesis all the way to the Gospels of things happening in this particular place. I was looking for something. That's about it. We'll talk through some things. So in looking at it, and just want to take really just a lot of pictures, because I think the pictures really do it kind of more justice, if you will, of just kind of understanding Jerusalem. And so normally people see, like the picture down here to my left, the gold, right, the Temple Mount, Rock of the Dome. That's what people normally associate with Jerusalem, but it's really that whole area that you're looking at from the walls. The picture down here to the center. So those stones that I'm by, that's bedrock. So imagine that. That means that is probably over 2,300 years old. That's like at the earth crust. That's bedrock. And so imagine them carving steps into bedrock. These people, we oftentimes talk about how skilled and stuff, and how much more advanced that we are, than people in the past. We got computers and cell phones. I'll be telling people, well, when you invent fire, when you find out fire, then you can probably make a comparison, right? So those people were very advanced. I mean, if you think about it, very advanced. Look at these buildings that these people built. And so these are just some of the ruins, if you will, from Jerusalem. Down here to my right, that's kind of present day of what some of the areas look like in Jerusalem. And so other pics that I saw. So this is the Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall. Now this is considered to be one of the most holiest places on earth, especially with those in Judaism. We know that the temple periods, if you will. So we know, whether you know it or not, there were 2 temples, right? The first temple, right, was destroyed in around 586 BC. That's not the temple that we talk about when we talk about the temple of God, right? That was built. all right, Solomon's temple, if you will, right? That was destroyed around 586 BC. And then the second, after the Israelites return, then we get into what we call the Second Temple period, and that's when the temple was rebuilt, right? And so that would have been the temple that Jesus was referring to. That's the temple that he saw was this Second Temple. And so in looking at it, I put some dimensions on this. That's one piece of stone, 11 and a half feet by 41 feet. And I think it's like, and it might be like 12 feet thick. That's the foundation. That's original to the temple wall. And I bring that up back to making the same, and you can see kind of a little glimpse of it in that center picture. And the reason I bring that up is just think about it. Something that dimension, that thick of concrete, that means that one piece of stone probably weighed over 1 million pounds. How they move that? You're talking about a feat of engineering, and not just that one, but the whole wall. These 1 million pound stones, getting them in place to actually build, this wall. That's how impressive, if you will, these people were. Just think about it, right? 1 million pounds moving it by hand, right? They ain't had no cranes, right? Question in the back.
Listen, I saw you show the temple.
Mm-hmm.
While you were there, you know how Revelation talked about the building of the next temple. Could you see anything going on in that perspective while you were there?
No.
Season we're in,
What's that?
knowing the season we're in right now.
No, there's not. There's no construction there. If that's what you're asking. There's nothing visible as far as building of another temple at this time, right? These are still, and it's still kind of a hotbed. You have a lot of different religions claiming the same areas, if you will, right? You have the Palestinian Jews there, the Jews there. You have the Muslims there. So there's different control structures that are happening. And so in this particular area, the reason why the Wailing Wall, and you can see me praying at the wall, that's just something you do when you go to Jerusalem, because what they believe is, if I show you a picture of a rendition of the temple, then the west wall, which is what this is, that would have been the wall closest to the holiest of holies. And so that's why, and it's not the full wall, but just that piece of wall that you see, they believe, and it is archaeological proof, right, based on the stones and things like that, that was part of the original Second Temple. That's all that remains of the original Second Temple. All kind of stuff. When it happened, I'm going to tell you. But that's what you do. When people take paper and they write their prayers down, and you can see all stuffed in the wall is just little pieces of paper. They just write their prayers on them, and they stuff them in the wall. Now, y'all don't go there just to take people's prayers out and read them. Man, get your own prayers, right? But that's what, how we be like, let me see what he praying. Oh, Yeah, but that's very sacred, right? To the Jews is to go to the Wailing Wall, and this thing it's crowded. It's just people everywhere. What I did find interesting though is that you'll see that there's a partition there, so the women are not allowed to come on the men's side, and the men not on the women's side. So the women actually have it's just a separate partition. And the women are on one side, the men are on another side when you go to the wall. Down below, there's tunnels underneath the wall, and we went down there, and that's how we looked at the stones and things like that to look at the tunnels that are in there. All right, doing all right on time. I think we're gonna make it. So this is a rendition, a model of Jerusalem. And so they actually took and built a full-scale 50-1 motto of Jerusalem, as it would have been during the Second Temple period. So back there, all the way to the back, that's where the temple would have been, obviously at the highest point there, and then you can kind of see. I'm sorry, it's down here to the bottom. That's where the temple would have been. And so they just have a full-scale model at the museum in Jerusalem that just shows you how things would be. So you can walk around and kind of get an idea of how these things would be, the city of David, and how Jerusalem actually would have been. So that was actually pretty cool to see that someone would build that. Could you walk through there? No. Well, I mean, you could, but they probably would not like that. Yeah, I mean, it's big enough. You can get in there if you want. Getting out might be another thing. So I would not recommend you go to another country, and because we'd be flying home without you probably. All right, and then looking at so this is anybody heard of the Via Dolorosa? What's the Via Dolorosa? Or you could just read it, what I put. No, I'm kidding. Right, so the pilgrims, right, it's the path that pilgrims follow to recreate Jesus' path through the streets of Jerusalem to Golgotha. So you'll sometimes hear, especially around Resurrection Sunday, Palm Sunday, things like that. You hear folks talking about doing the 14 steps, right? And that's what the Via Dolorosa is it's basically Jesus' last steps, right? From Garden all the way to Golgotha. And when you go to Jerusalem, they have it marked off in all these different places. But remember, we talked about building on top of things, right? So even though you'll be up here, right, on the city street level, they do have those locations marked with churches and things like that so that you know where they were. However, in this particular point, we're way up underground. And so this is the actual, if you will, Via Dolorosa, right? So this is the actual street that Jesus would have walked down when you're in Jerusalem. You just have to go underground, and they have excavated it and put some things there. And so that's just I think that's just a special place to be able to stand, on the actual road that, or the actual street, if you will, that existed during the time of Jesus. This particular road, if I could run through that wall back there, then that would go to what's called the Antonius compound, and that's where they took Jesus afterwards and where they kept him, flogged him, and all that stuff at. That's where that particular road leads to. Yep, so that's the actual streets that were in Jesus' days. Any questions on that?
It's personal. How did you feel?
How'd I feel?
When you were there.
I feel good. I don't know. I'm not I go, I value the places and the archaeology, and understand the history. But I don't, I didn't feel like, ooh, Jesus, I feel Jesus, No, but I think there's value to saying that this is, like I said, I felt encouraged knowing that the things that I read in the Bible, right, I believe them already. But it's even more encouraging when I can say, right, or I'm in conversation, with someone that says, I don't really believe that. I've stood on the road. These things exist, and it's irrefutable evidence, about what the Bible says happened and things like that. And so from that perspective, that's why I said I felt good seeing that and being able to understand the history that's there. Then I did enjoy that. Mm-hmm.
It's just that I've heard people who have gone to Jerusalem who were believers,
Mm-hmm.
and they said when they went, it just deepened their faith even more. So when they came back, it was a different it was a different worship, it was a different prayer, it was a different experience. So
Oh, for sure. I definitely think that that's, I definitely think that that happens. Yeah, I definitely think that happens. It does. Like I said, I think that's the same wording when I say it's encouraging, right, to see those things that I already believe in, you know, to see those things and then be deepened by them. So I certainly agree with that. All right. So let's see what else we got here. I like this one, right? When you look at Matthew 24:2, and pastors brought this up before, says, but he answered them, you see all these, right? Do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down, right? And that's when the disciples are just marveling at the temple. Man, it's a bad temple. I mean, right? And Jesus is like, right? This thing gonna be knocked down, right? In other words, this marvelous monstrosity of a sight, you're not even gonna be able to recognize it, right? There's not gonna be one stone left. And those are not recreated. When they unearthed, if you will, these ruins, this is what they found, right? And thinking about it, that's, okay, so explanation-wise, you see the wall there and you see the stones. So if you look at the base of that wall, they look like those stones, right? That's original. That's the only part, is the base of that wall that's original. What has happened is over the years, when different people would, you know, Israel has a history of being captured, taken over, different people groups move in, they gain control, gain authority. Well, when they do that, they rebuild things, right? So throughout the different periods of times, if you were to take your eyes and start at the bottom and go up, you'll see the stones changing. Right, those are different periods of time. That's what that is. They didn't just run out of those stones and just say, go to get these other ones, they on sale. No, those are different periods of time. And so if you look at those original stones that are on the ground there, you can see how the bottom layer, especially when you get lower to the bottom, they look like those stones. So that gives you factual data. Right, so in other words, they didn't set these stones up like this when they excavated this area. And you can kind of, I think there was, I don't have it in this picture, but there's a mark on when you're looking at the wall where they can tell you this is how high the dirt was. So in other words, this is how much they had to dig down to get when they were excavating this area. And so that's what they found. You know, so that gives validity and credence, right? Not one stone left on top of another, right? That they found. This is how destructive, right? When they came in and destroyed the temple. And what's interesting that I found is that these are limestones, and apparently, if you get lime hot enough, it actually will burn. And so these things were on fire in some areas. When they destroyed the temple, because they were talking about setting fire. So like, how you set fire to stone, right? But apparently limestone, when it gets hot enough, it actually will burn. I'm gonna have to push it a little bit. Okay, so the garden. This is another one, right? This is another one. This is, where's this place? We call it the Garden of Gethsemane, right? The word is, it's an Aramaic word, and it's God-smani. God-smani, right? God is wine or oil. Smani is press, right? So if you think about it, it's the oil press. That's what we call, but we couldn't say that, so we just combined it together. Gethsemane, right? So what I like about this one, to my left is just the actual garden, and you can see it is just a garden, right? Those trees, olive trees. Now they've got olive trees in there that are hundreds of years old that are still bearing olives. I thought that was remarkable. Hundreds of years old, still bearing olives. Now, what I put in the other pictures, though, is I thought it was so relevant that Jesus died in the garden of the oil press. And so I wanted to show how they would get the oil out of the olives, right? So in antiquity, this is what an oil press is. You see my man down there? Right? So what they would do is they would take the olives and they would fill up this vat, if you will, with just the olives. And then they would get a donkey who is yoked up with this wheel, and the donkey would just go around and around. That thing weighs like thousands of pounds, right? That stone. And so as he's going around and around, he's crushing the olives, right? That's the first crush of the olives. That particular oil goes to the priest, right? Because it's the first fruits, if you will. Now what you have is that those up in my upper right-hand corner, what they would do is they would take the pulp from the olives and they would put them in these bags. And they would take all these olive pulp, put them in these bags, and then they would stack the bags up onto another press. And then at the bottom, if you can see at the very end, that's what that's showing up at top. And so they would take all of these bags and they would put them inside that second press, and on the back of it is weights, and then they would just weight it down. And then the weight would act almost like a cantilever, which means that it just pivots, and then it would just put all that pressure on these bags. And as they would sit there, then they would add more and more weight, which would be a further crushing of the olives, and then you would get that. That's what we would call maybe the first one would be like the extra virgin olive oil, right? This would be like the extra virgin olive oil. So this went, for use in other places, food and things like that. And then they would further extract the oil from it. And then there would be another crushing of the oil. And then that might be the oil that you use for your lamps. And so this is how they extracted the olive oil from the olives. And I thought it was so fitting that the Garden of Gethsemane, or the Garden of Gethsemane, right, the Garden of the oil press, is where Jesus spent his moments at, right? And that's where he was captured. That's where he was, right, accosted at. That's where, so the crushing, right, of Jesus has a direct relevance, right? Remember, it says not just people, it's places too. God does things that are so significant that helps us to kind of understand, right? When we think about he was bruised, right, for our transgression. He was, right, bruised for our iniquity, right? The chastisement, right? Our chastisement. In other words, the things that we should have been punished for, right? He was crushed for. And so I thought there was such a relevant significance to understanding what the Garden of Gethsemane means. Now, it just wasn't a place where he was just at, right? Remember, in the garden, that was a place of agony, right? That was a place where he was, great, he prayed until great, right, drops of blood came out, things like that. And so it's just really relevant. I'm not going to get to the last part, but I do want to finish this one before we close out. Actually. So I love this one, right? But on the first day of the week at early dawn, right, they went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared, and they found, right, that the stone was rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body of our Lord Jesus, right? I went in the tomb, right, where they said it, and guess what? He's not there. So I really enjoyed that. I'm gonna move out the way. I don't know if you can see this picture over here, down here. Can everybody see that picture? All right, that's so there is what you brought up earlier about the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, right? So there's two locations where it's debated where Jesus died, where he was laid in a tomb. One of those places is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And that's where you see most people will go to, and there's long lines to get in, and that's where most people go to. This is the other location, which is the Garden Tomb. I think it's, if I'm putting one or the other, I think it's here for a couple of different reasons. One is that picture there, that's from the Garden Tomb that you can see. Golgotha was really just a rock quarry. And on that picture, if you look at it, that I circled, you can almost see where it looks like It kind of looks like that's why they called it Golgotha, the place of the skull, right? Because it looked like a skull. And so that was one reason. Additionally, why I think it's here is because when they crucified you, crucifixion was a form of punishment, and they wanted you to be seen. And so this particular place is right along one of the Roman roads, right? And so that kind of makes sense that he would be crucified in kind of a place where people would walk by, right? So just understanding how they did things back then. And so that's why I also kind of believe that this place makes more sense. And it says that Jesus was crucified outside of the city, right? This is outside of the city. And the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is in Jerusalem. You know, now there's some debates about walls and things like that, but I tend to think that this is probably a better location. Things kind of match up better with what's occurred here. And so that's what I like. There's a few more other pictures, but I really want to stop here because I think that's a good stopping point just to kind of understand, right, getting us to that place. We talked about God's plan of salvation starting off, and the fact of why Israel was so important, and not just, right, Abraham, but also the place that he sent Abraham to, and the role of the Israelites and being able to be God's representative in the earth and promote God's kingdom, getting us to a place where we get to this empty tomb. You know, and I think that's just so relevant, you know, for us to understand how God is orchestrating all these things through the dawn of time to get us to a place, right, where we understand his plan of salvation for all of humanity. So I really appreciate you folks allowing me to go through my little trip to Jerusalem. If anyone is ever interested, thank you. If anyone's ever interested, then reach out to me. I can put you in contact with the. I went as an invitation from one of my seminary professors, but he's gone like 12 times over the past. He just goes every year, and he's willing to take anyone with him that wants to go. So if that's you, give me a name, and I'll send you some information, things like that, and then you too can experience the Holy Land. So just real quickly by way of announcements, like I said, keep our pastor and first lady lifted up in prayer. They're going to be traveling here pretty soon, and we certainly would pray God's favor for the assignment that they have to go on, and we just know that God's going to give them great success in what they're doing. Also, I want you guys to remember, coming up on First Sunday, we are going to be celebrating our pastor's birthday. And so we certainly want everyone, thank you for that, certainly want everyone to come out for that celebration. Those that desire to bring a gift, right? Those that desire to shake his hand, he'll be there available for that. But certainly want to wish him a very happy birthday, and certainly looking forward to celebrating him. That'll be First Sunday that we'll be doing that. Also, the Pearls of Wisdom, they're going to be having a garage sale. They're asking that you bring your gently used clothing, right, such that someone can gain great benefit from the things that you can no longer fit in or wear. If you can still get in it, give it to us anyway, right? You done wear it enough, but definitely do that. And trying to think, was there anything else out there? I believe that's right for those in not all the zones, but some of the zones will be fellowshipping coming this Sunday. So certainly looking forward to that. And all right, I think we're ready to stand. All right. Thank you so much. And we're praying. Our kind and gracious Father, we ask that you would just continue, Lord, to favor us as we go deeper into your word. And Lord, as we learn on this year about rest, pray that you would give our hearts and minds, Lord, to take that into full account, God, Lord, that you have given us, Lord, the mandate to rest because, Lord, you know the things that we need to do and the rest that we need to get. So we ask, God, Lord, that as we learn about these things, that we make it up in our minds, Lord, that we're going to try to get rest, that we're going to make plans, not just do it haphazardly, Lord, but that we're going to plan these things out. I thank you, Lord, for the opportunities that you have given on tonight. Thank you for allowing me to share, Lord, the things that you have blessed with, God, and just pray, Lord, that you would just bless our body as a whole. Keep us, Lord, as we depart from this place, but never from your presence. It's in Jesus' matchless name we pray. Amen. Thank you so much.